They handed my brother a check for $100,000. And they gave me nothing. Not a dime. Tell me. Have you ever been overlooked, even by your own family? It cuts deeper than most things in life. But here's the twist. The very house they thought I'd never touch is mine now. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about money. It's about pride and betrayal and sweet, unexpected justice. So, what would you have done in my place? I still remember the day like it was yesterday. We were all gathered in the living room of my parents' old house. My brother Mark sat there with his polished shoes, smiling like the world belonged to him. And in a way, it did, because when the lawyer pulled out the will, the entire room seemed to tilt in his direction. "Mark will inherit $100,000 to support his future endeavors," the lawyer read aloud. My heart sank. 100,000. Just like that. Then came the silence. A pause so sharp, I swear you could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. I waited for my name, for something, anything. But instead, the lawyer folded the papers, cleared his throat, and said, "That concludes the reading." That was it. No mention of me. No token of love. No small gesture. Not even a photograph tucked aside. I tried to keep my face steady, but inside, it felt like I had been erased. My parents had always praised Mark, the golden child. He was the one who got the new car at 16. He was the one sent to college with their full support. And me? I was told to make do. To be strong, and now, at 49, sitting in that dimly lit room, the pattern had repeated itself. Only this time it wasn't a car or tuition, it was $100,000. Mark leaned over and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Guess they knew who the real success story is." The words stung, but I bit my tongue. What could I say? I had worked hard all my life, built a modest career, raised 2 kids on my own. I didn't need handouts. But to be so completely dismissed, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about dignity. Everyone left that day with smiles and handshakes. Mark practically floated out the door, check in hand. And me? I stayed behind, running my hand along the banister of the staircase, the wood smooth from decades of family footsteps. This house was filled with memories, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, even arguments that echoed late into the night. As I stood there, I made a silent promise. If they thought I was invisible, they were wrong. This story wasn't over. Not yet. Little did I know fate was already setting the pieces in motion, because while Mark was out celebrating his sudden windfall, I was about to stumble upon something hidden in plain sight, something that would change the balance forever. A week after the will was read, I found myself back at the old house. Mark hadn't even bothered to stop by. He was too busy showing off his new windfall to his friends, but someone had to sort through Mom and Dad's belongings, and apparently that someone was me. I walked through the room slowly, dust catching in the sunlight. Every piece of furniture told a story. The oak dining table, where Dad used to fall asleep after Sunday dinners. The floral curtains Mom insisted on keeping, even when they went out of style 20 years ago. I ended up in the study, Dad's study. The place was cramped, with shelves stacked high and papers spilling out of drawers. I was just about to close the door when I noticed something odd. A drawer that didn't quite fit right. It stuck out, uneven with the rest. Curiosity pulled me closer. I tugged at it, and after a little force, it slid open. Behind the stack of old tax papers and receipts, I saw a small, leather-bound notebook. My heart gave a jolt. Dad's handwriting was unmistakable. Neat, but with that slight tilt he always had. I sat down right there on the floor and opened it. Page after page was filled with Dad's notes about the house, the land, even the repairs he'd made with his own 2 hands. And then I saw it. A line that stopped me cold. The house is to remain in the family. Ownership shall transfer to my daughter, who always cared for it as I could not. I blinked, reread it. My daughter. Me. I turned to the back of the notebook, and there it was. Dad's signature. Dated. Witnessed by one of his old friends. Mr. Walker, the notary who lived 2 streets over. I sat frozen, the weight of it sinking in. Mark had his money, yes. But the house? The very foundation of our family, the place everyone assumed would fall into his hands. Dad had chosen me. Quietly, without announcement, a rush of emotions hit me. Relief, vindication, and yes, a touch of sadness. Why hadn't Dad said it outright? Why had I been left to find this like some buried treasure? But deep down, I knew. Dad had always trusted me to do the right thing, to protect what mattered. He didn't need to make a show of it. He left the proof where he knew I'd find it, because I was the one who always kept coming back, who always cared enough to look. I closed the notebook carefully and held it against my chest. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt steady for the first time in days. Of course, the discovery was only the beginning, because once Mark found out, he wasn't going to let go without a fight. And I'll tell you this, nothing prepares you for the moment when the brother who mocked you, who dismissed you, suddenly realizes that the very house he thought was his is yours. It didn't take long for word to get out. Small towns have a way of carrying whispers faster than the wind. Within a week, Mark was at my door. He didn't knock politely. No, he pounded. 3 heavy thuds that shook the frame. I opened it, holding the leather notebook tight against my chest. "What's this I hear about you owning the house?" he snapped, not even bothering with a hello. His face was red, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. I stayed calm. "Dad left it to me. It's all right here." I held up the notebook, my voice steady even though my hands trembled. Mark snatched it, flipping through the pages like a man looking for an escape hatch. "This doesn't count," he muttered. "It's not part of the will." The lawyer didn't mention it. I crossed my arms. "Mr. Walker notarized it. It's valid, Mark." Dad knew exactly what he was doing. His jaw tightened. He shoved the notebook back into my hands like it burned him. "So you get the house, and I just get a check?" That's not fair. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Not fair? You've been handed everything your whole life. The car, the tuition, the praise, and now $100,000. And you think it's unfair that Dad trusted me with the one thing he wanted preserved?" For once, Mark didn't have a snappy comeback. He just glared, his silence louder than any words. I went on, my voice softer but stronger. "This house isn't just wood and nails. It's history. It's Mom's laughter in the kitchen. It's Dad fixing the porch swing. It's every moment that made us a family. And Dad knew I'd honor that." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. But then his arrogance flared back, as it always did. "Well, you can't afford to keep it. Houses cost money, taxes, repairs, upkeep. You'll end up selling it anyway." I looked him square in the eye. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll prove you wrong. Either way, this isn't yours to decide." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, notebook pressed to my chest, my heartbeat echoing in the silence he left behind. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the familiar walls. Mark was right about one thing. I didn't have much saved. Life as a single mother didn't leave room for big bank accounts. But I had something Mark never did. Determination. And deep down, I knew this house wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. Dad trusted me to carry it forward. I couldn't let him down. The next morning, I started making calls. To the bank, to the county office. To Mr. Walker piece by piece, I gathered the proof, the documents, everything I needed to make the ownership official. And with each step, I felt stronger. Not because I had beaten Mark, but because for the first time in my life, I was standing fully in my own worth. Mark thought this house was his by default, but he was about to learn that default doesn't win against determination, and that sometimes justice waits quietly until it's ready to speak. The weeks that followed were nothing short of exhausting. Mark didn't let it go. Not for a day. He started with phone calls. At first, they were polite, almost rehearsed. "Look, sis, maybe you should just sign it over. I'll even give you a cut of the money. Think about how much easier your life would be." I told him no. Then came the threats. Veiled at first, then sharp. "You'll regret this. You don't have the money to keep that place. You're going to drown in taxes and repairs. Better to let me handle it." But every time he tried to scare me, I felt Dad's words from that notebook echo in my mind. "The house is to remain in the family. Ownership shall transfer to my daughter." So I doubled down. I went to the courthouse, filed the paperwork, and made sure every signature was in place. I called in Mr. Walker, who confirmed the validity of Dad's private directive. Piece by piece, the foundation of my ownership grew stronger. But Mark wasn't done. He hired a lawyer. One morning, I found a letter slipped under my door. a notice disputing my claim. My stomach sank. But then something inside me hardened. I had spent my life being overlooked, dismissed, brushed aside. This time, I refused to shrink. I called a lawyer of my own. It wasn't cheap, but when I explained my story, she leaned forward, her eyes sharp and steady. "You've got more than a case," she said. "You've got truth on your side." That gave me strength. The court battle dragged on for months. Mark showed up every time, smug in his tailored suits, armed with his expensive attorney. I showed up with my notebook, my documents, and my resolve. During one hearing, Mark sneered across the table. "You think you can win this?" "You've got nothing compared to me," I looked him dead in the eye. "I've got everything that matters." It rattled him. I could see it. At night, though, when I was alone in that house, doubt would creep in. I'd walk through the creaking halls, touch the walls, and whisper, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll protect it." And the house became more than bricks and wood. It became a promise, a living memory of the people who raised me. Neighbors began to notice, too. Some stopped by with pies, some with words of encouragement. "Your dad would be proud," Mrs. Collins from down the street told me one afternoon, patting my hand. Those words carried me when the legal fees mounted and the hearings dragged. Finally, the day of the decision arrived. The judge shuffled the papers, his expression unreadable. My lawyer squeezed my hand under the table, and then came the words that changed everything. "The court finds in favor of the defendant. The property rightfully belongs to her." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then it hit me. I had won, against the odds, against Mark, against years of being the shadow. I looked over at him. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. He stormed out of the courtroom without a word. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The house was mine, not because of spite, but because of truth. And in that moment, I felt Dad's presence more than ever. The house felt different after the ruling, lighter, somehow, like the walls themselves had been holding their breath, waiting for the verdict, and now they could finally exhale. I walked through every room that night, running my fingers along the banisters, touching the faded wallpaper, breathing in the scent of wood and time. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in my own memories. I felt like I belonged. Mark, of course, didn't take it well. Word spread fast, and soon neighbors were whispering about how he'd lost. I heard he started drinking more, bragging less. That $100,000, the very thing he flaunted so proudly, began to slip through his fingers. New cars, fancy dinners, ill-advised investments. It vanished quicker than anyone expected. One afternoon, I spotted him outside the courthouse. He looked older, thinner, his suit a little more wrinkled than before. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no gloating in mine, no smugness, just quiet recognition. He turned away first. Meanwhile, I threw myself into the house, not to show off, not to make it grand, but to restore it to the warmth it once had. I painted the porch, replanted Mom's roses, even fixed the squeaky floorboard in the upstairs hall that had driven us all crazy as kids. Neighbors stopped by more often. Some brought cookies, some just stories. The house became alive again, not just with my memories, but with community. And every time someone said, "Your dad would have loved to see this," my chest swelled with both pride and tears. I wasn't rich. I didn't suddenly have stacks of money or flashy cars, but I had something Mark could never buy with all the checks in the world. Roots, stability. A place that whispered, "You matter, you belong, you're home." On quiet evenings, I'd sit on the porch swing Dad once built, sipping tea as the sun dipped behind the trees. The same swing Mark used to push just to hear it squeal. Now it was steady beneath me, just like my life had finally become. Sometimes my children would visit with their own little ones, and the halls would echo with laughter again, the kind of laughter that makes a house a home. I'd catch myself smiling, thinking, this is why Dad chose me. Not because I had more, but because I gave more. And as for Mark, the last I heard, he rented a small apartment across town. The money was gone, the glory faded. He never came back to the house. Maybe pride kept him away. Maybe shame. But for me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. Because in the end, Dad's words in that notebook weren't just about property. They were about trust, about faith in the daughter who stayed, who cared, who carried the weight when no one else did. And now every time I step through that front door, I don't just see walls and furniture. I see my father's quiet love, my mother's gentle hands, my own resilience stitched into every corner. The house isn't just mine. It's a story. One that says, no matter how many times you're overlooked, sometimes life finds a way to remind you you were never invisible. Looking back now, I realize it was never really about the money or even the house itself. It was about finally being seen, finally being trusted. My father believed in me quietly, without fanfare, and that faith gave me the strength to stand tall when everyone else thought I'd crumble. Mark walked away with a check, but I walked away with something money can't buy. A legacy, a home filled with love, and the knowledge that I mattered. So if you've ever felt overlooked or dismissed, remember, sometimes life has its own way of balancing the scales. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have fought for the house or walked away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, stay with us for more stories just like this.